courtroom fell into a heavy, breathless silence as Judge Malcolm Hargrove delivered the final blow. This court finds the defendant, Captain Emma Sullivan, guilty of first-degree murder. The words struck the room like a thunderclap. Emma, a decorated U.S. Army medic who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan before losing her leg to an IED, remained outwardly calm. But the faint tremble in her hands and the tightness in her jaw betrayed the storm inside. Just months earlier, she had been a respected war hero. Now she sat in a cold courtroom convicted of killing her former commanding officer, Colonel Thomas Caldwell. Her face revealed little, but her silence said everything. When the judge sentenced her to death by lethal injection, a gasp swept through the gallery. She didn't cry. She simply turned to the back of the room where her German Shepherd Ranger sat loyally beside her father. "Take care of him, Dad," she said quietly. "Don't let them put him down." The case had seemed airtight. Emma's fingerprints were found on the murder weapon. Her blood was discovered at the scene. Surveillance footage showed her car near Caldwell's home on the night of the murder. Prosecutors framed her as a bitter, unstable veteran, angry over Caldwell's refusal to approve her medical leave. What the jury never heard, what the judge deliberately excluded, was the truth that Colonel Caldwell had been under investigation for covering up multiple sexual assault cases in their unit, and that Emma had been one of the whistleblowers. Evidence of Caldwell's threats against her and his role in denying her benefits had been ruled prejudicial and never made it into the courtroom. As a result, the public saw a one-dimensional narrative, an angry veteran turned violent, not the complex reality of a soldier failed by the very system she dedicated her life to. Emma's court-appointed lawyer, Sam Preston, tried to protest the ruling, but Emma stopped him. "They won't believe me anyway," she said. There was no drama in her voice, only weariness. She had survived bombing's battlefield trauma and the loss of fellow soldiers, but nothing had prepared her for this, being abandoned by the country she had fought to protect. The courtroom officers moved in to take her away, and as they did, Ranger let out a low, mournful whine that echoed off the courtroom walls. Emma didn't look back. She couldn't. And yet the fight wasn't over, not for Emma, and certainly not for Ranger. The loyal service dog had been trained to detect Emma's panic attacks, to nudge her awake during nightmares, to steady her balance when phantom pain racked her body. But now, he would be the one to uncover what human investigators had missed. Unbeknownst to the court, to the prosecution, or even to Emma herself, Ranger's senses and loyalty would set into motion a chain of events that would expose the truth and turn this so-called open and shut case upside down. In the days following Captain Emma Sullivan's sentencing, the Sullivan household was heavy with grief, tension, and disbelief. Victor Sullivan, a retired sergeant major, and Emma's father refused to accept the court's decision. He knew his daughter, her integrity, her courage, her unwavering moral compass. But it wasn't until Ranger Emma's loyal service dog began behaving unusually that Victor sensed there might still be hope. The German Shepherd, trained to detect signs of stress and danger, started pacing, whining, and pawing at the door, as if urgently trying to communicate something. Emma had entrusted Victor with Ranger, fearing the dog might be euthanized if left with authorities. The two had shared an unbreakable bond forged through years of service together. Now Ranger's heightened agitation was impossible to ignore. Late one evening, as Victor reviewed newspaper clippings and court transcripts, Public Defender Sam Preston arrived with another folder of appeal documents. Ranger immediately stood, his eyes locked on the duffel bag containing Emma's belongings. He sniffed, pawed, and growled softly, finally nudging it toward Victor. Victor opened the bag, assuming Ranger was simply anxious about Emma's absence. But beneath her folded running clothes, he discovered a small GPS fitness tracker, a device Emma had used religiously to manage her rehab runs. Sam quickly connected it to his laptop. The data revealed that on the morning of Colonel Westfield's murder, Emma's run had taken her miles away from the crime scene. "This contradicts the prosecution's entire timeline," Sam said, eyes wide. "They claimed she drove to his house during this time, but she couldn't have. She was on the other side of town. Ranger wasn't done." He nosed through the bag again and uncovered Emma's shoes, spotless, with no trace of the gravel that lined Westfield's driveway. The growing stack of inconsistencies was troubling, but it was still circumstantial. What they needed was hard evidence, something irrefutable. The next night, Ranger began pacing again. Then he stopped at the front door and barked once, sharp, urgent. "He wants us to follow," Victor said. Sam, skeptical but desperate, grabbed his coat and laptop, and together they followed Ranger into the Texas night. The dog led them across town and toward the perimeter of a nearby military base. "We'll get arrested," Sam warned, eyeing the restricted access signs, but Victor pressed on, wheeling his chair through the shadows as Ranger veered around buildings with precise confidence. They reached a service entrance near a maintenance shed. There, behind a row of dumpsters, Ranger stopped and sat staring at one in particular. Sam hesitated before lifting the lid. Among the debris, he spotted a plastic bag containing a blood-stained uniform jacket with a name tag, Garrison. The implications were chilling. "This changes everything," Sam whispered. Back at home, as Victor and Sam debated their next move, a knock came at the door. Standing outside was Lieutenant Diane Foster, a woman in her early 30s with a haunted expression. "I served under Emma in Afghanistan," she said. "There's something I need to tell you, something about Westfield and Major Garrison." Inside, Foster explained that Emma had uncovered a scheme involving military contracts, kickbacks, and stolen funds from veteran rehabilitation programs. Westfield and Garrison had been siphoning millions. When Emma raised concerns, she was threatened. The night Westfield was killed, Foster added, "Emma wasn't the only one who visited him. Garrison went there afterward. I saw the security footage myself until it mysteriously disappeared. Then with trembling hands, she pulled a USB drive from her jacket. Emma gave me this the day before Westfield's murder. She said it contained financial records, emails, evidence of the fraud. She told me to protect it no matter what." Sam inserted the drive and watched as the files loaded spreadsheets, internal memos, and email chains tying Garrison to the fraud scheme. "It's motive," he said, "but still not enough to exonerate Emma for the murder." As if on cue, Ranger barked and pawed at the door once again. Victor turned toward him, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "He's not done yet." Ranger led them to a second location on base, an administrative building. There, a sympathetic records clerk named Sergeant Willis gave them access to sealed files. They found that the original forensic report showed 2 blood types on the murder weapon Westfield's and an unidentified sample. This evidence had been mysteriously omitted from trial. Willis handed them a flash drive and urged them to leave before the next security patrol. Back home, just as they shared their findings with a federal CID officer, Special Agent Camila Ortiz Ranger went on high alert again. Through the window, they saw a black SUV parked across the street. A coordinated team burst into the house, attempting to seize the evidence. But the files had already been secured, and Ranger's instincts had bought them the time they needed. With each new discovery, it became clear Emma Sullivan was not only innocent, she had been set up. And her service dog, Ranger, armed with only loyalty and instinct, had become the key to unraveling a conspiracy that ran far deeper than anyone had dared imagine. Ranger's instincts had never been wrong before, and this time was no different. As the loyal German shepherd paced between the door and Captain Emma Sullivan's packed duffel bag, his signals were too deliberate to ignore. Victor Sullivan, Emma's father, leaned forward in his wheelchair and opened the bag again, his fingers brushing against something he hadn't noticed before, a small slit in the lining. Hidden inside was a micro-memory card. She always backed up everything Victor muttered, passing it to Sam Preston, Emma's public defender. Sam quickly inserted it into his laptop, his heart racing. The screen blinked to life with encrypted files. Camila Ortiz, a CID agent and old friend of Victor's, leaned over. "I've seen this kind of encryption before. It'll take time, but we can crack it," she said with determination. Ranger, watching the interaction, suddenly growled and positioned himself by the window. A black SUV was idling just across the street. Lieutenant Diane Foster, who had recently come forward with whistleblower information, visibly tensed. "They've been following me since I testified," she whispered. "They're not just watching, they're here to silence us." Before anyone could react, a window shattered at the back of the house. Ranger launched into motion, barking furiously as the team scrambled to respond. Ortiz drew her sidearm, taking a protective stance by the hallway. Moments later, Ranger emerged, dragging a man by the sleeve, a military police corporal. Blood dripped from a bite wound on his forearm. Ortiz didn't hesitate. "Name, rank, and orders," she barked. "Corporal Jenkins, MP," he stammered. "I was ordered to retrieve evidence for Major Garrison." That name hit the room like a lightning bolt. The man had been trying to destroy the very evidence they had just discovered. Within minutes, Ortiz's team secured the property and placed Jenkins under arrest. He would later admit, under pressure, that Major Philip Garrison had ordered him to remove and destroy files tied to the murder of Colonel Westfield and the veteran contract fraud Emma had uncovered. The house had become ground zero for a massive military scandal, but they needed more. Ranger wasn't finished. With his tail stiff and ears pinned forward, he once again began to paw at Emma's gear this time, nosing aside her old running shoes to reveal a GPS tracker. Sam connected it to the laptop, and within seconds, it displayed data that contradicted the prosecution's timeline. Emma had been on the other side of town during the time of the murder. "This is hard data," Sam said. "Not just motive anymore. This destroys their timeline." And then came the break they didn't know they needed. Ranger, head low and nose to the ground, led Victor and Sam to the base's storage yard. Hidden inside a dumpster behind a locked maintenance gate, they found a plastic-wrapped, blood-stained uniform jacket bearing Garrison's name tape. Ortiz, now convinced of the conspiracy, took the evidence into federal custody. But before they could act on it, Garrison struck again. The lights went out in Victor's home. Voices and shadows approached. The team hunkered down as men loyal to Garrison broke in, disarming Ortiz and attempting to reclaim the flash drives and evidence. It was chaos until Ranger stepped up again. During the standoff, Victor placed the memory card and flash drive in a pouch on Ranger's vest. With cover fire from Ortiz, they opened the back door and let Ranger slip into the night, trained for silent delivery in hostile conditions. His target, General Jonathan Winters, the base commander and Emma's longtime mentor. Under cover of darkness, Ranger crossed the military base, slipping through shadows, evading patrols, and entering General Winters' study through an open window. When the general looked up to see Emma's service dog standing before him, calm, poised, and carrying evidence, he knew something was terribly wrong. As Winters reviewed the files, Garrison's men were raiding Victor's home. But the general wasted no time. He called in military police who surrounded the house and arrested Garrison and his entire team. The scene shifted from peril to vindication in a matter of minutes. Ranger, battered but unharmed, returned with the arrest team. As Victor reached out to stroke his loyal companion's head, his voice broke with emotion. "You saved her, Ranger," he whispered. "You did what the whole system wouldn't." What began as a desperate attempt to clear a name had become something more, a full-blown exposure of corruption, collusion, and the lengths one loyal dog would go to ensure justice was served. But Emma's fight wasn't over yet. The evidence had reached the right hands, but the clock on her execution was still ticking, and Ranger, still standing proud, wasn't about to let anyone forget what was at stake. As the evidence against Major Philip Garrison mounted and the clock ticked closer to Captain Emma Sullivan's execution date, desperation gave way to bold action. With the appeal process stalled and powerful connections shielding Garrison from immediate arrest, the team faced a chilling reality. Emma had less than 10 days to live unless something extraordinary happened. And that something, as unlikely as it seemed, would come in the form of her fiercely loyal service dog, Ranger. It was Victor Sullivan, Emma's father, and a retired sergeant major who first had the idea. She trained Ranger for search and rescue, emergency message delivery. "That dog knows this base better than anyone," he said, his voice heavy with resolve. Camila Ortiz, the Army CID agent investigating the case, hesitated. Sending a dog to hand-deliver crucial evidence to a base commander seemed far-fetched, but they had run out of options. "If anyone can make it through undetected," Victor continued, "it's Ranger, and the man he needs to reach is General Andrew Winters." General Winters had once mentored Emma when she was a cadet. He was known for his integrity and had the authority to issue an emergency stay of execution. With armed men still surrounding Victor's home, Garrison's final attempt to retrieve or destroy the evidence, the mission had to begin immediately. Ortiz loaded the encrypted flash drive, GPS data, and memory card into a reinforced pouch and attached it to Ranger's tactical vest. Victor knelt beside the dog, his eyes glassy with emotion. "Find the general boy," he whispered. "Find him for Emma." At Ortiz's signal, Victor cracked open the back door, and Ranger slipped out silent as a shadow disappearing into the night. Moments later, Ortiz fired 2 shots into the air through the front window, drawing Garrison's men toward the front of the house and buying Ranger time. Inside, Victor, Sam Preston, and Lieutenant Foster braced for the worst. Meanwhile, Ranger moved with purpose, his training and instincts guiding him through back alleys, drainage ditches, and maintenance roads toward the base commander's residence. Twice he froze, pressed low to the ground as military police patrols passed by. Once he doubled back to avoid a convoy, but nothing slowed his drive. With the moon above and Emma's scent etched in his mind, Ranger reached the residence in under 45 minutes. At the commander's house, 2 MPs guarded the front, but Ranger circled the property and found a half-open window in the back study. He pushed through, landing silently on the rug. General Winters looked up from his desk, stunned. Ranger, he breathed, recognizing the dog immediately. What the hell? Then he saw the pouch. Winters retrieved the note and Data inserted the flash drive into his computer and began scanning the evidence. Within minutes, his expression turned from confusion to alarm. He saw everything: the hidden recording of Emma's conversation with Colonel Westfield, the suppressed forensic report, the GPS tracker disproving the prosecution's timeline, and photos of Garrison's bloodied uniform retrieved from base property. It was overwhelming and irrefutable. Back at Victor's house, Garrison arrived in person, seething. He stormed into the living room and struck Victor across the face, demanding to know where the evidence was. "You're too late," Victor said through a split lip. "It's already in the right hands." Garrison's eyes darkened. He ordered his men to search the house again, but even he looked rattled. Minutes later, his phone rang. It was General Winters. The conversation was brief and devastating for Garrison. "Yes, sir. No, I wasn't aware of any new evidence. Sir, that's not... Yes, I understand." He hung up his hand, shaking. Just then, flashing red and blue lights filled the windows. Military police surrounded the house. A voice rang out from a loudspeaker: "Major Philip Garrison, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice conspiracy and the murder of Colonel James Westfield. Come out with your hands up." Inside, Garrison's men panicked. Some dropped their weapons. Ortiz seized the opportunity to take back control. Garrison looked like he might draw his sidearm, but one look at Ortiz's unwavering aim, and he knew it was over. He surrendered. General Winters entered moments later, Ranger trotting proudly by his side. He approached Victor and saluted. "Sergeant Major Sullivan," he said solemnly, "Captain Sullivan's execution has been stayed. She will not die for a crime she didn't commit." Victor, overwhelmed, leaned down and pulled Ranger into an embrace. "You did it, boy," he choked. "You saved my daughter." The sun shone brightly the day Emma Sullivan walked out of the prison gates a free woman. Her uniform had changed from camouflage to the orange of injustice, but her spirit remained unbroken. General Winters, who had once sworn her in as a young recruit, stood waiting with open arms, and beside him, tail wagging furiously, was Atlas. The moment they reunited, the crowd gathered outside witnessed a rare kind of love, the kind that survives war, betrayal, and even death row. Emma chose not to return to military service. Instead, she opened the Emma Sullivan Veterans Advocacy Center, a place where those failed by the system could find the support she never had. Legal aid, PTSD counseling, housing referrals, it became a haven for those whose voices had gone unheard. Atlas, now a national symbol of loyalty, helped train other service dogs, his presence calming the most wounded of warriors. Emma's story teaches us that true strength lies not in how loudly we speak, but in how deeply we care. In a world that often overlooks silent suffering, her fight reminds us that justice is not just a courtroom word, it's a promise we must keep for one another. If this story moved you, leave a comment honoring someone who stood by you in your darkest moment. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful true stories that restore our faith in courage, loyalty, and love.